Welcome back everyone, my name is Kevin and I've been using the Samsung Galaxy A13 smartphone for over a month, long enough to confidently bring you my full review. This device brings the 90Hz refresh rate feature to Samsung's budget lineup. It has kept all of the fan favorite features and it has a fantastic 5000 mAh battery. Everything from the display quality to the speakers, gaming performance, battery life and more will be addressed and explained now. To start, with the Galaxy A13, we get revised aesthetics on the back of the phone, making it a uniform matte finish. The camera modules are now separated, and there are 3 lenses, one less lens than its predecessor, the A12. The lens that was removed was not the macro lens, it was actually really useful. Say goodbye to the ultra-wide lens. Some of the changes that Samsung has made to this iteration will make it even more appealing to a wider demographic, including people who are using their phone for gaming. Now in the battery life and in the gaming section of this video, you'll see what I'm talking about. As for the other important features that we could want on a phone, the A13 has you covered with a dual SIM tray that also has a spot for a micro SD card slot, and the headphone jack is still here. Taking a look at the packaging, you'll see the A13 box is a lot smaller, and this is because Samsung has removed the most important accessory inclusion, the wall adapter. We get the paperwork, SIM tool, and a USB-C to C cable, but I'm really not happy with Samsung for removing the basics of what's required to charge your phone. Now that we've got the worst parts out of the way, let's talk about that 90Hz display. Samsung is using TFT display technology, not AMOLED, and that explains how they got a high refresh rate on a budget phone that is starting at this low of a price. Adaptiveness of the 90Hz feature is something that is very appropriate here in my opinion, because it is a budget phone after all, and it'll switch down to 60Hz to prevent significant frame drops. I have only good things to say about this display. The colors are really nice, the viewing angles are impressive for a TFT display, and the panel is housed really tightly underneath that glass, so there's no light coming through from the corners of the phone. 6.5 inches at a resolution of 1600 by 720 gives the Galaxy A13 a pixel density of 270 pixels per inch. It's sharp enough to satisfy my requirement in the price bracket. The display has an aspect ratio of 20:9, which I really like for watching movies and YouTube videos. We have 2 biometric unlocking methods here in addition to the regular pin, pattern, and passcode. The fingerprint scanner is placed under the power button, and you can scan up to 3 fingers, no more than 3. You can see how fast this scanner is when I actually place my finger correctly. It works best when you cover the entire sensor, and sometimes it does require a slight lift of the finger and readjustment to get that scan perfect. So it is not a perfect scanner, and the sensor itself isn't placed in the ideal spot in my opinion, but when you get used to it, it's fast. The face registered unlock is straightforward. If you do go with this option, I think you'll be very pleased with the speed of the face unlocking. On a whole other note, the carrier compatibility with GSM networks that I tested was phenomenal. Voice quality for calling was good on both ends, and the phone has 5G capability. The data speeds are quite fast. The Samsung Galaxy A13 was initially released as a carrier exclusive in America. Now of course we're going to see it roll out globally to countries all over Asia, Africa, North America, and Europe. When I see the device coming out in countries that I have a lot of viewers in, I'll be linking it in the description of this video, alongside where to buy that Samsung fast charger if you do go for the A13. If you're still watching my A13 review and you're following along, leave a like on the video, and if you really want to see more content on this phone, let me know in the comments. Onto battery life. This is another area where the new A13 is impressive. With my typical daily smartphone use, I end each day with between 35 to 50% charge left. You can safely expect over 8 hours of screen on time, and I'm getting even beyond that with my use. I'm spending more time playing games on this phone than I usually do on budget phones because of that awesome refresh rate. I also watch YouTube, check emails and social media, and play music aloud on the speakers often. This says a lot about how good the battery life is, considering I've always kept on the adaptive display mode and I raise the brightness almost all the way with no dark mode turned on. I do not use Bluetooth very often, however mobile data and Wi-Fi are always turned on. With my typical day-to-day smartphone use, I can make it through a day and a half with a single charge. Now making it to the 2-day mark is possible if you don't find yourself watching a lot of YouTube videos and you don't do a lot of gaming. When it comes to battery life, what more could you ask for? The loudspeaker, by the way, has seen a minor improvement. It now sounds clearer at full volume and it gets really loud. The exact model that I have has 64GB of storage and 4GB of RAM, This is the A13 5G that I purchased from America and had imported here to Canada, of course with my money. In the near future, we might be seeing a 4G version that could be aimed at the Asian market, particularly India, and if we do see that, it would have all different specifications and it would be more affordable. However, the 5G version of this phone says a lot about the trend that Samsung is following and carrying on in the future with the A series devices. The budget-oriented A13 smartphone has a bigger battery life than the new S22 and S22 Plus. Instead of drawing any more comparisons between this and other Galaxy devices, I have decided to make a full, dedicated A12 versus A13 head-to-head comparison video. I'm looking for recommendations from you as to which phones I should compare the A13 to after that as well. Samsung has shipped this phone with Android 11 and Core One UI version 3.1, not to be confused with the regular full version of One UI, and I'll tell you the differences between what the core version brings with the A13 in just a bit. I was expecting this to come with Android 12 already, but that update is coming soon, and for those curious, last year's A12 is also set to get the Android 12 update sometime around June of this year. For the tech enthusiasts and the mobile gamers, this next part is for you. I said earlier, some of the internal changes that Samsung made to this year's main budget phone is to make it have a more enjoyable gaming experience, not only through high refresh rate, but also allowing us to bump up settings on graphics intensive games like Call of Duty Mobile, PUBG, and Asphalt 9. Asphalt 9 plays smoothly on high quality visual settings. This is the only app in which I experienced an app crash, and I really believe this is an isolated incident due to the poor optimization for the MediaTek chipset. In COD Mobile, we can play medium settings on high frame rates. The gameplay is nice, there was no overheating, and I did not feel like the device was hindering my competitiveness in this game. The same can be said about PUBG, where we can currently play high frame rates on HD settings, and higher graphics options will be available in the near future if developers work on optimization. In games that actually take use of the high refresh rate mode that the phone has, like old school RuneScape, there's no problem there either in the gameplay. Overall, I'm very happy with the performance that Samsung has brought to the gaming experience of this phone, considering the price. Before I get into the benchmarks and talk more about my experiences in the day-to-day use when it comes to the A13's performance, I want to talk about storage expansion. Now, I mentioned that the A13 has a micro SD card slot. If you want to take use of a micro SD card to move apps onto there, here is a brief look at how that process works, because it does require an extra step. We're going to open Settings, scroll down to About Phone into Software Information, and tap the build number until the developer options are enabled. In that menu, we'll scroll down to near the bottom and enable Force Allow Apps on External. Now, in the Apps menu of settings, we can easily select and change storage location to that micro SD card. This trick works on a lot of different phones, so if you're currently struggling with storage on your device and your phone has a micro SD card slot, or even an Android tablet, give it a try. Getting back to the daily performance of the Samsung Galaxy A13, I've really enjoyed my experience with this over the past month of testing it out since I pulled it out of the box. The chipset is MediaTek's Dimensity 700 5G, a 7nm chip paired with the Mali G57 for graphics. The fact that this phone has 4 gigs of RAM is going to be a deterrent for some tech enthusiasts who only look at specifications, but in my experience, I can tell you honestly, having more RAM would not help here, and the rest of the bottlenecked hardware would be the issue, not the RAM. There's nothing wrong with 4 gigs here. Benchmarks are an area of course worth mentioning, and the A13 5G has a single core score of 466 and a multi-core score of 1101. I'll talk more about benchmarks in my comparison of this to the A12 and perhaps the Galaxy A11 if you want to see that. I'll give you the summarized version of what the differences between One UI and Core One UI are. Essentially, Core UI is a cut-down version that doesn't have Samsung DeX, and you also don't have the Samsung Bixby voice assistant, but I'm not going to be complaining about the absence of that feature. The main difference that affects most users is that we cannot connect the device to a PC and get as much freedom of control, such as viewing your phone notifications and messages. Of course, file management is still an option. When you connect the phone to a laptop or desktop, you still have the option of doing the file management that you would on any other phone, so this is not a deal breaker for me. Now, let's touch on the build quality and the feel on the hand with this phone. It's a unibody plastic finish without striped textures, and it feels nice in the hand. Noticeably plastic, especially when it comes to that power button, but the volume keys are very nice in my opinion. We shouldn't expect a no-compromise perfect design for a phone of this price, and believe me, I've used enough budget phones to know this is not cheap feeling. It's well weighted, and unlike some affordable phones, this has a glass front. It still picks up fingerprints, but I've seen far worse. As for colors, with the A13 5G, this phone comes in green and black only right now. And between those two, I would recommend the black one. It's a really safe choice, and it looks really good with this design. When I pulled the phone out of the box, here are some quick adjustments I made to it. This phone's display is big. It only makes sense to switch the icon grid size to 5x5. I recommend changing the Android on-screen buttons to the full-screen gesture navigation as well. Now, we're on to the cameras. There's 3 lenses on the back here. The main 50-megapixel camera is the middle one. This is a 2-megapixel macro camera, and the top lens is for depth tracking. It's also 2 megapixels, and it's used to create the portrait blur effect more naturally. Now, we have seen devices do portrait blur just fine without a whole dedicated depth lens. The real reason this is here is because Samsung has sourced a really inexpensive camera lens for the main one, and it doesn't have good depth sensing. Really, they're all low-cost components, but when you house it into a phone looking as good as this, a lot of people are going to assume that it's a sophisticated photo powerhouse. You can be the judge of how sophisticated the main camera sensor really is based on my photo tests. The main lens is not stabilized, so therefore, hold still when you're taking photos, and when you do take the perfect shot, the colors are good. The color range and accuracy was right up to par with my expectations. It made subjects look lifelike, yes, even the stuffed bear, and the dynamic range was not bad. Sharpness is a highlight to this main camera, but only when photos are taken in the 50-megapixel mode, and when the subject is not moving. That is to say, the lens struggles a lot with capturing a moving subject. If that occasion does come to be, I recommend switching to the regular 3:4 ratio mode, and going into the burst shutter by swiping down on the shutter button. In this regular 3:4 ratio mode, there is also a 2x crop button, but this is just digitally zooming. In terms of video recording, the A13 can do 1080p at 30 frames per second. It's enough to capture an important moment, though I have to mention that without stabilization, there are some noticeable camera shakes. The camera app has food mode, panorama, and pro mode in addition to the portrait lens blur, which uses the depth sensing lens. When it comes to that macro lens, Samsung has been using the same exact 2-megapixel macro camera for 4 years now, and here is yet another example of that. The front selfie camera is a 5-megapixel lens at f2.0 aperture. Tell me if you approve of these selfies I took on it. I'll make sure to include the selfie test when I do the Galaxy A13 versus A12 comparison, so you actually get a chance to see if Samsung did improve that front camera. Bringing things back to the packaging, I wanted to expand upon my thoughts on Samsung removing the wall adapter from the box. Now, this would be less of a problem if Samsung had made up for it in some way that other manufacturers have not, such as including wireless charging. This phone does not have that. The 15-watt USB-C charger that Samsung recommends is an additional $15, and let's be clear here, 15 watts isn't actually really fast charging, especially for a phone that has a 5000 mAh battery. All in all, you may actually find a better deal with an older mid-range device that's now discounted to be the same price that the A13 is coming out at, and I can see that being a better option for a lot of people. If you really want to have a new phone from Samsung, one that is 5G, and one that is going to have a fantastic battery life, one that's going to be longer screen on times than even flagships, you can't go wrong with the A13 5G. I know you have some suggestions for future Galaxy A13 videos. Don't be shy, put them in the comments, and before you write off this phone or go ahead and buy it, you're gonna want to see that full head-to-head comparison between this and the Galaxy A12. I will stay up to date with you in the comments. Thank you to everyone who subscribed and watched until the very end. I really appreciate it, my friends. Talk to you soon.